Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chap, believing in my own will. Rap, fire, math, evil, scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, set and ready for that ghost kill.
Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of The Maple Pill. This is going to be a special episode tonight, episode 45. I've pre-recorded this episode, so I'm currently traveling, but I thought, let's talk about some books. And so in particular, I'm going to be just rhyming off 3 books here primarily, and then I've got one more bonus book. And these are, kind of prepper-oriented, shit hits the fan, end of the world as we know it sort of books, but they're in fictional universes. And so I've definitely read some, very hands-on technical prepper books and things of that nature. But 3 of these books really just stood out to me as books I enjoyed. And before I even jump into kind of chatting with you guys about these books, I'd love to hear what would your thoughts be in regards to us maybe starting up a book club around the Maple Pill. Not necessarily with books like these, but not necessarily not with books like these either. So again, I've been, harping to you guys for a long time that you need to read Willful Blindness by Sam Cooper. And maybe that would be a good one for us to jump off with there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. Let me know in the comment section. If this is something you guys are interested in, also let me know what platform should we essentially do it on. What I'm currently thinking is we would either create a channel on the current Problems or Profits Discord, and again, link in the video description down below to the Problems or Profits Discord, or alternatively, maybe start up like a Telegram group. And essentially, I imagine maybe we'll do a book a month, and we'll all jump on like a Zoom call at the end of the month, and we can kind of share our thoughts, our opinions. Now, the only thing I'm going to warn you guys, if we do start a book club, I actually do take book clubs pretty seriously. I used to run one for my former team members back when I had multiple businesses, employees, and things like that. So I will absolutely kick your ass out or ban you if you don't actually read the book. So it's not just like a hangout session or anything like that. I really do love books, fiction, and nonfiction books as well, and just kind of exploring ideas and topics and subject matters like that. So again, give me your feedback. Would you be interested in Maple Pill Book Club? What should be some of the books we consider reading in the first year of the Maple Pill Book Club if we do launch it? And just give me all your thoughts and opinions. But let's jump into the first book I wanted to chat with you guys about, and this is The Mandibles. This was actually recommended to me by a follower of mine on Instagram. I absolutely actually love this book. In fact, I've read it twice within the last year. And so he told me about it, I'm going to say maybe the summer of 2021. And for me to read a nonfiction book twice in a single year is almost unheard of. I think there's literally only one other fiction book that I've probably ever done that with. But this book is really fascinating, in my opinion. It essentially documents the journey of a family, an extended family, and their experiences as and there's going to be spoilers here for all these books. I'm not going to spoil major plot points, but I'm going to talk about general themes and things of that nature. So if you're the sort that would hate for anything to be spoiled, this probably isn't the video for you, or just skip to the books that you've already read yourself. But in The Mandibles, essentially what happens is the US dollar collapses as the reserve currency for the world. So essentially China and Russia and I forget if there's other countries involved, but they decide to launch a new reserve currency called the Bancor, and that's actually backed by physical goods. So it's actually based upon a basket of commodities and things like that, but you actually have to back up it rather than having it be a fiat currency. And so this absolutely decimates the American markets, the American economy. But this book, one of the reasons I think I particularly love it is actually there's a couple. One is the fact that it actually spans an extended period of time. So as the book says here, it actually goes from, let's get that on screen, but essentially goes from 2029 to 2047. So it's looking at essentially a span of 2 decades and how the economic collapse in the United States impacts this extended family. So essentially you've got multiple family units and yeah, actually, there's so much to parse out here that I'm kind of losing myself on how I want to introduce these ideas without trying to spoil too much. I guess one of the reasons it really stands out for me, and I refer to it kind of as a prepper book or a shit hits the fan book, but it's also very practical. So it's not filled with a lot of high drama and shooting people and not intense in that sort of sense. But there's also certain level of it that feels very practical, right? Like the currency collapses, the economy collapses, and because of that, you have this giant shift in how American citizens, they go from being American consumers to actually, being citizens again. And so it particularly takes the viewpoint of a family in an urban environment. So I'm trying to remember now, but I think they're in a suburb of like Washington, D.C. or something like that. Or maybe they're in New York. Actually, New York, that's where it is. But essentially from this, you start going through austerity, right? But it doesn't happen all at once. So what happens is like, you go to the grocery store and all of a sudden it doesn't buy as much as it used to. Maybe that even sounds sort of familiar to some of you guys currently living in 2022. But then all of a sudden, like things start to change and people start to change. So all of a sudden, people aren't as friendly out in public. People are a lot more reserved about talking about their personal situations. You start to see people, the day they get paid is the day they go to the grocery store, because if they wait a week, the currency will have inflated so much that they'll actually be able to buy less. And this feels very reminiscent of like the Weimar Republic in Germany, right? Back in the, I forget the timing now, the late 20s or early, must have been late 20s, right? Where essentially you have this experience of your currency being inflated to the point where it becomes worthless. And so in Weimar Republic, there's actually like, and this is real stories now, there's stories of people going into like a coffee shop and they order their first coffee, drink it, and then they order their second coffee. And by the time they order their second coffee, the coffee is actually more expensive. So literally prices are being updated, like not daily, but multiple times throughout the day. And that eventually is what you start to experience as well through the Mandibles. And essentially it starts off with this family dynasty that made, a forefather of theirs. I forget, he did some like chemical thing, or anyways, he built some sort of a financial empire. His son goes on to build a literary empire. And then you're kind of dealing with the additional generations. And there's so much to parse out here. And yet at the same time, it also focuses on like practical things. Like what happens when toilet paper just disappears, right? What happens when all of a sudden like plumbing no longer works, or when water becomes so expensive that you no longer want to use it for like as a waste product, or when you have to start rationing showers and you shower once a week or once a month versus essentially being able to treat water like an infinite resource, which a lot of us are very comfortable with. What happens when your neighbors start to become very hungry? What happens when the entire community or the city around you is starving, right? Will you start to become the sort of person that lurks around at night and is willing to steal from your neighbors? Will you do whatever it takes to survive? What happens when you get evicted or you lose the home you're living in? Do you go to a homeless shelter? What if homeless shelters aren't even there anymore? What essentially if the social fabric starts breaking down, right? And there's looters and thieves and just bad actors around every corner on the streets. And what if a lot of those people used to be stockbrokers or, physicians and things of that nature? How practical are the skills that you currently have? And again, this book has, I guess, of all the books we're going to kind of discuss tonight, it's got a very practical sense to it, in my opinion, because of the nature of how it approaches the collapse. Probably my biggest beef is that in the book, Bitcoin essentially turns out to not be valid and just disappears. But I think for the purposes of this universe, it actually makes a lot of sense to just kind of like shun cryptocurrency so they can really fully explore this. And yeah, it's fascinating, right? Like what do you do if you know that your dollars are going to be worth less a week or a month from now? How do you invest it, right? Particularly if the stock market, if real estate becomes extremely unstable. Well, you start to think about things like staples, like, buying bulk lots of flour and salt and, things of that nature. But again, a lot of people are thinking very similarly to you. So game theory starts to play out and all of a sudden everyone's rushing to those resources. So what are maybe some secondary resources people need? And, how do you build up stockpiles of that? Does a trade economy start to exist? Again, absolutely love this book. I read it twice in 1 year, which speaks volumes because I pretty much just never do that, and particularly with a fiction book. So highly recommend this book if you guys are interested in grabbing it. There's a link to an Amazon affiliate link in the video description down below. But if you don't want me to get paid, no harm, no foul. Again, just look for or Google the Mandibles. But really do recommend it. And I'd love to, someday have an in-depth discussion on this book. But I'm also trying to avoid any spoilers. So I'm talking in broad strokes. But essentially, the future, like going a decade or two down the rabbit hole of this timeline, you start to see things like CBDCs. And again, they're not necessarily called CBDCs, like central bank digital currencies in this book, but for all intents and purposes, they are. Same with things like digital IDs and, government thinking that the only way they can save you or save us is through more tyranny, more rules, more restrictions. And again, that's one of my fears going into a potentially volatile society, which it kind of feels like we're in 2022. So again, highly recommend this book. And so again, there's like some practical lessons here, but it's not written like a how-to manual. It's much more fiction oriented. I really love the jumping between different family members and extended family members. And it allows you to get a full spectrum experience, right? A lot of people think, okay, we're shooting our neighbors, people are becoming cannibals, all this, that, and the other. And there could be random pockets of that, but realistically, most scenarios that are higher probability that we're going to experience in our lifetime, they look a lot more like the Great Depression or what's highlighted here in the Mandibles than necessarily what you'd see in like movies like The Walking Dead or TV shows like The Walking Dead or movies like The Road and things of that nature. So again, highly recommend it. Next one I want to bring up, this one's much more like a how-to manual. So this is Patriots. And it's actually very technical. I would say it's like technical first with just a layer of fiction on top of it. So much more like how-to-ish. But again, unlike a lot of the nonfiction books that you'll read in the prepper community or the shit hits the fan community, all that stuff, this one's, again, does have a fictional storyline, just enough, I think, to like keep you interested. But again, the practical how-tos and explanations on how these people prepare for the collapse of the U.S. Again, in this world, in this universe, it as well starts with a currency collapse and like financial paper markets collapsing. But in this case, in the Mandibles, they essentially refuse the call to adventure and call to action, and they drag their feet at every obstacle that's presented to them. Where in Patriots, these people are hardcore preppers. Like, they absolutely put me to shame. They put every single person I've ever met that even mildly considers themselves a prepper or even just preparing for the future to shame. So like, these people have arsenals. They've, some of the stuff that they explore and talk about, you're like, man, if we're on the darkest timeline, you want to be with people like this, or you want to be thinking like these people. So discussing things like, making sure everyone in your community buys the same sort of gun and everyone buys the same sort of car. So you've got interchangeable parts. Because again, if we look at a complete supply chain deterioration, it could be years, it could be decades, it could be generations before you're able to get replacement parts for certain things, as well as like very practical aspects of like, we're going to just assume electricity ceases to exist. And sure, it'd be fun to have like wind power, like wind turbines or generators and things like that. But on a long time horizon, all those things will disappear and deteriorate as well. Now, this one's much more like violent, right? Like a lot of people die in this. They essentially take on, this is a bit of a spoiler alert, but I don't think too much. They take on kind of like a new world order government or the UN, whatever you want to frame it as. This was originally, or this is written by the editor and I think the founder of Survival Blog. So I've mentioned that to you guys before as well. Again, really great book. Highly recommend. It is more technical. So again, if you're looking for just like a fun story where you're going to get lost in the story, there's going to be times where you're like, am I reading a how-to manual on how to like perform, surgery to remove a bullet from a person? Because they're going to talk about like literally running the IV lines and like the tools necessary and how to sterilize things and getting really deep. Again, you would want more books than just this book if you're preparing for the end of the world as we know it. But for a fictional book, it's actually going to be a great resource and maybe just something to like stir your curiosity, right? Or pique your curiosity in certain corners. And again, one of the things that's interesting is the group of characters here, they actually preemptively are forming a intentional community where they're actually being selective about the people they even bring into their community. And then those individuals all have responsibilities to become, experts in certain fields. So like one person's the medic, one person's the mechanic, one person's the knows guns, right? Like he's kind of running the armory. One person's the farmer, and one person's the logistician. One person's ex-military, so they understand how to train everyone to go on. Oh man, I just read it too, but I'm drawing a blank here. But it's very technical, very good, and highly recommend you guys check it out if you're into such a book. Again, you're probably not going to get lost in the fiction, but it's fantastic. This third one here, this one's these two both document the actual collapse of the world, where this one kind of fast forwards several generations after the US's collapse. Julian Comstock, it's by far the thickest book that I'm going to be recommended tonight as well. So this one's rocking 600 or 700 pages, I think. Yeah, just under 700. A little bit less on the practical sense, but again, just kind of a fun book to explore in this world or universe. Essentially, the US collapses, oil becomes a lot harder to come by, and you're dealing multiple generations after the initial collapse. So it's looking at the 22nd century and kind of how the US has balkanized to a certain extent. European powers have invaded Upper Labrador and Quebec, and the US Army fighting with them. But again, there is certain military strategy involved in this book, and definitely just a fun, interesting book. Again, of the prepper books, these two are much more practical. This one is if you're very black-pilled and you think the New World Order is going to come banging on your door and you're going to have to fight them with guns. This one's much more like, hey, incompetence is going to lead to a currency crunch or a currency collapse. And, shit's going to hit the fan, but it's not going to literally be like we all become cannibals or we have to run from zombies. The Mandibles probably the book you want to start with there. But if you're looking for a third one, or if you've read the other two already, Julian Comstock is the one I'm going to recommend to you. And then finally, I'm excited because I just got this one in the mail today, actually. And this is Survivors. So it's not actually a sequel to the Patriots book, but it's written by the same author, and it sounds like it's in a similar universe. So I'm going to be reading it on my travels over the next week. Looking forward to checking it out. And I'd love to hear from you guys. What are some prepper survivalist books that you've really enjoyed, whether they're hands-on tutorials and technicals, or whether they're more fiction and there's just a little bit of interesting insights? I don't know. Even if you never use this information, even if we never find ourselves in this sort of world or universe, fingers crossed we never will, I still find it fascinating to explore these ideas. There's just something that feels like you're more connected to nature, or the more animalistic sides of humanity, right? When we're thinking about societal collapse, there's also, in theory, the dream of being able to create a utopia or better version of society, where oftentimes it feels hard or almost impractical to be able to nudge society in the right direction, and starting over from a clean slate sometimes feels tempting. So again, curious if you guys enjoyed this. Would you like to see more videos like this on the Maple Pill? Again, this is just a special episode right now because I'm traveling and it wasn't going to be practical for me to be in my truck shooting a live show where I had to prep for 4 hours, because essentially I wouldn't get anywhere if I was spending 4 hours a day prepping for the show like I do for most episodes of the Maple Pill. But I hope you guys enjoyed going down this random tangent. Again, give me your book recommendations. Let me know if you'd be interested in a book club in regards to the Maple Pill and the Problems or Profits community. And then, yeah, if you guys enjoyed this, do smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the YouTube channel. And if you want to follow along with me on Instagram, it's Matt McKeever Unfiltered. It's right there. And that's it for tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's crazy to me that we've been able to go 45 episodes deep without me getting canceled yet on YouTube, though we do have one strike, so we have to be careful. But if we ever disappear completely off of big tech, you can find me on BitChute as well as Rumble. Links to those channels in the video description down below. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you for episode 46 on Monday. All right, let's play ourselves out here.
Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chap, believing in my own will. Wet fire, math, stable scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still